everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end-of-life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Welcome to another episode. A few months ago, I had the privilege of sitting down with Erica Baccus to share the story of her husband, John's journey with Alzheimer's and the difficult, courageous decision they made together for him to pursue an assisted death in Switzerland. If you haven't heard that conversation yet and would like to hear John's story in full, you'll find a link to that episode in today's show notes. Since then, Erica has poured her heart into a new book, A Promise Kept, Honoring His Wishes, Embracing Our Love. It's raw, beautiful, and full of moments that speak to what it means to love someone through the hardest chapters of life. Today, Erica returns to talk about the caregiving journey, the grief that comes long before someone is gone, and what it's like to live with both the weight and the gift of having honored someone's final wish. We'll also hear about the work she's doing to support others facing similar decisions. So grab a warm drink, find a comfortable seat, and join us for the conversation. Erica, welcome back, and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Traci. It's my pleasure. And thank you for having me again.
You're welcome. Now, before we start reading from the book, I'd love to hear what's been going on. I know I've seen your social media and you've been really busy.
Well, I've entered into the world of social media, and this is fairly new for me. And I'm just trying to get people to know me a little bit better and to anticipate the book that's coming out hopefully soon, early September, end of August, sometime around that time frame. And I just want people to get a look at John and me and the life that we had before he died.
You've done a super job with that social media and your website, ericabaccus.com. It really represents who you are. And I just love seeing that. I love all the pictures and how you post about John. You really get a good idea of who he is. And I know that you've received a lot of reviews. I think that the LA Tribune has reviewed and gave an outstanding review, actually.
Yeah, it was a beautiful review and I really appreciate it.
So I'd like to start by having you read a story or a short passage from your book about John. I want people to really get to know who he was before the diagnosis. What made him laugh? What did he love?
So before I do that, my book starts out and tells about how John was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and talks about his illness and in the ensuing days. But it also jumps backwards to our life together, from the first day we met and our romance. So it's a back and forth between the illness and our 41 years of this wonderful life that we had together. So there's flashbacks and back and forth. So all through the book, I mean, you really get to know John. And John was the kind of guy that everybody loved John, and he had a great laugh and a great personality, and kids and dogs loved him, and so did I. I'll read you just a short passage from the very first day that I met John. This chapter is called Trust Your Lust. I met John on my first day of work at SmithKline Diagnostics on a February day in 1977. I had a brand new job as a customer service executive for the diagnostics department. I joined a group of about 10 women who sat in one large room with computer printouts, which identified which customers were having a problem with their orders. I was given a territory and told to figure out how to solve customers' problems. Before I even sat down to work on that very first day, I met John. I was standing in the large lobby area in front of our office space, talking to my new boss, Dorothy. In the middle of our conversation, a tall, handsome man dressed in navy blue pants and a white shirt unbuttoned at the top and loose tie strolled up to Dorothy for some work-related question. He was polite and seemed unusually at ease and friendly. Dorothy introduced us. John was 31, I was 33. Erica, this is John Baccus. He's the manufacturing manager here and is responsible for packaging our product. John, this is Erica. It's her first day at work. She'll be reporting to me. Nice to meet you, Erica. Congratulations on your new job. Has anyone given you a tour of the building yet? No. I looked at Dorothy for permission, and she nodded her head to say, go with him. Smith Klein was a very lengthy building with manufacturing at the back and marketing sales in the front. John was a manufacturing manager in charge of packaging, and my new job was located in the marketing area. Welcome, Erica. I'll introduce you to some people you'll need to know. It is a very friendly place here, so feel free to stop by and talk to anyone. Thanks, John. This is really nice of you to take time out for me. We stopped by an office where the door was open. Hi, Martha, John said. This is Erica. It's her first day here. I know you two will get to know each other. Erica, this is Martha. She's head of human resources and a very funny lady. The usual nice to meet yous were exchanged, and we went on. Hey, Richard, meet Erica. She's working for Dorothy in customer service. First day today. I bet you're going to be a big help to her. Hi, Erica. Welcome aboard. If you need help understanding the chemistry in our products, I love to teach. Thanks a lot. I will definitely remember you said that. John kept strolling to the back of the building, introducing me to Margaret, Ed, Ron, and his own boss, Les, until we reached his office. This is my sanctuary away from the crowds. Have a seat for a moment, and then I'll walk you back. I watched John push aside a pile of papers and light a cigarette, pulling an already overflowing ashtray closer to him. Then I saw the surprise. Behind John's chair was a magnificent aquarium filled with multicolored tropical fish. I thought, what a strange thing to have in an office. John, that is a beautiful aquarium. I guess you're fond of fish. Yeah, I really like to sit back, have a toke on my joint, and watch the fish swim. It relaxes me.
That's great.
The end of that chapter, it goes on from here where I go home that night, go to bed, and wake up the next morning and think, oh my God, I dreamed about John. I dreamed about the man with the sexy long legs and the navy blue pants, and told myself, you can't dream about him. He's married and you're living with someone. And then I
Wow.
thought,
Okay, so I want to read this book. You know, it sounds amazing. That
he
that is a great story. That is a wonderful story. So
that
thank
was
you for
John.
sharing. Now, so you were married, and when did you find out he had Alzheimer's? What led up to that diagnosis?
Um, in 2017, which is now 8 years ago,
Mm.
um, we went to Europe on a vacation, and we were in Vienna and had gone sightseeing like you do, and we were ready to go back to the hotel. And John had a paper map in his hand that he was using. He was a really great map reader, and I not a good map reader. And he preferred to have an actual map than to use his cell phone. And I watched him as we were trying to get back to the hotel, and he took this map and he kept turning around and turning it around and turning around, and he was confused. And I thought, what's going on here? And I would ask him, John, what's going on here? Do you need help? Is there a problem? And he got really agitated and really angry with me for asking. And I finally had to pull out my cell phone and get directions back to the hotel using my cell phone. And we got back there, and he started uh, like having an argument with me. And it was so shocking because I had no idea why we were arguing. And I certainly didn't want to argue. We were on vacation. And then I noticed he didn't remember what we had done the day before. And when I would tell him what we were going to be doing the next day, he would forget. And I thought, this is all very weird, but we were on vacation and we were having a good time. And so I thought, I'll think about this later. And we got home after the trip was over and he went back to normal. And so I decided to forget about it. I decided I don't want to think about this, and he's normal, he's fine, and everything's cool. Then 2018 rolled around and I noticed he was forgetting certain things. And we went to our primary care doctor together somewhere in 2019. And John told the doctor, I'm concerned about my memory. And I was surprised that he said that because we hadn't really had a serious discussion about that. Anyhow, he told the doctor, I'm concerned about my memory. So the primary care doctor put him through the standard memory test that they do, and he aced it. He did better on it than, I was doing it in my head while he was doing it. He was better at it than I was. And the doctor said, well, so you seem fine, but if you're really concerned about it, I'll put an order in for you for UCSF, and you can call it's the UCSF Aging and Memory Care Center and make an appointment and go see them. By the end of 2019, in December, things had changed enough. I started noticing more and more that he was not remembering certain, what we did the day before, or he couldn't remember appointments and just small little things. And I had talked to my sister, who's a nurse in Wisconsin, and had let her know that I was concerned. And she said to me, Erica, if he has Alzheimer's, if he has dementia, the sooner that you get to it, the better, because they do have drugs now that can slow it down. So John hates doctors, or hated doctors. And I told him what my sister said, and he said, okay, you can call. And so I made an appointment, and we had an appointment on January 20th, 2020. January 24th, 2020. And before the appointment, he had had an MRI. So when we got to UCSF, they had the results of the MRI there, which indicated it was I can go into this, it was a 8-hour day with a whole team of doctors talking to John, talking to me, putting John through tests and everything. And then at the very end, they bring us into this big conference room and they have his images up on the screen and explain to us that he had plaque in the hippocampus, which affected his memory. And at that time, he was diagnosed with cognitive, what do they call it? Cognitive impairment, early cognitive impairment, consistent with early Alzheimer's.
Now, what are some of the most important things you wish that families knew early on when caring for loved ones with dementia?
The thing about dementia is that it strikes everyone differently. Everyone's symptoms are different. John had some symptoms that the doctors had never seen before. He had tremors that started out in his hands and then went into his body. And if you would see him towards the end, you could see waves in his belly and just tumulting waves, which interfered with his breathing. And they did all kinds of tests to see what this was because they had no idea. And by process of elimination, they said it was a symptom of Alzheimer's. And it was very difficult for him because, as I said, it did impact his breathing and it made him very, very uncomfortable. But to your question, because it's different for everyone, you need to be prepared that when you see strange things happen, you have to be prepared that strange things are going to happen. And you have to sort of just go with the flow. Um, the other thing that I noticed was that John would develop symptoms and then reach a plateau, and he would stay there for a while, and sometimes for months. And you think, oh, this is great. It's not going to get any worse. He's just fine. It's okay. We can live with this. And then another set of symptoms would happen, and he'd decline, and then he'd stay at that plateau for a while. And this kept happening throughout the years that he was sick. So, and I adjusted to that. I learned that this is what happens, and I learned to accept, okay, we're at another plateau. And of course, the neurologist and the team at UCSF helped me understand what was going on and where we were in the process. The other thing is that I tried really hard, and I knew this instinctively, that I wanted him to maintain his dignity and his independence. And I learned not to correct him in front of other people. Well, first of all, I learned not to correct him at all, unless it was absolutely necessary, and particularly in front of other people. And it's so interesting because, when you're married and your husband, you're at a dinner party and your husband says, "Oh, we went to see the movie last week and we saw the Marvel movie." And you say, "Oh no, honey, that was 2 weeks ago and it wasn't the Marvel movie, it was da da da." It like makes absolutely no difference, right? But we do that, or at least I did it in our marriage. And I learned to stop doing that because it doesn't matter. And all it does is make the other person feel bad. So it was a wonderful lesson I learned. Um, and I think another thing that I think that I learned is that not only did John's life change, but my life changed as the dementia grew. The things that I had to do changed. The feelings that I had about leaving him, like to go out with my friends or to go play golf without him, we had tickets to go to a show, and he, the last minute, said, "I don't feel like going." And then I said, "Well, I'll stay home too." "No, you go." And was it right for me to go, or should I not? Should I stay at home? All of these things were considerations that I didn't expect to happen. I didn't know would happen. And you sort of have to just learn while you're doing it.
So your world became smaller
Yes.
and at times more lonely.
Yes.
When the moments when you did feel completely alone, how did you find support or create it for yourself?
Well, one of the things that happened was that we didn't tell anyone that he had Alzheimer's for a very long time until we had to, because it was obvious. Um, and so I'm walking around thinking about it all the time, which I isolated myself that way. And so I felt very alone from the very beginning. Um, my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law is a physician, and my sister, as I said, is a nurse. And they were my help. They were the people I could talk to. They were the people I could call on the phone, and my son. And they were my support. And they're both out of state. My son and my sister and her husband are both out of state. So there were a lot of phone calls. But my brother-in-law in particular, I would call him and I'd say, this was further down the road, and I would ask him questions like, "John is sleeping all day long. John is sleeping all day long. What do I do? What's happening here?" And he said, "Erica, his brain is slowing down. His brain controls everything. And so his organs are slowing down. Everything is slowing down. And that made sense to me. So he could explain the medical side in lay terms for me to understand and know that it wasn't that scary. Okay, he needs to sleep. Let him sleep.
Now, let's talk about John's decision to die with dignity. What led up to that moment? How long had it been? Like, how long had he been talking about before it became real?
Well, first of all, you have to know John. This was so John. John was an extremely independent person who loved life. And he would say to me, my brain is my person. If I don't have a brain, I don't want to be here. And my mother had early onset Alzheimer's. And John knew that from being married to me. I would talk about my mother and what that was like. Um, so it raised the question for us early on, what would we do in a situation like that? And I always thought it was going to be me. And I would say to him, I don't want to live through that. It's a terrible, terrible ending. And we both had medical directives that we wrote when we wrote our trust. And in both of our medical directives, it says, I forget the exact language, but no extraordinary actions should be taken if we were to be really ill in the hospital. Um, and so we both had the attitude that we did not want to prolong life when there was no quality of life. And we talked about that. We didn't have regular meetings, but it would come up every now and then in our marriage for years. So when he was diagnosed, he had two questions for the team that sat around the table with us. There were 5 doctors on the team. His two questions were, one, can I still drink alcohol? To which the doctor said, alcohol is never good for anyone. But yes, I'm not going to tell you now that you can't have that glass of wine with dinner. His second question was, how long before I'm a vegetable? And she said, well, the average is about 5 years from diagnosis. In our case, we knew in 2017, although we ignored it. But the diagnosis wasn't until 2020. So he lived until 2023. But that was his question. How long before I'm a vegetable? Because he was planning. We walked out of there and neither one of us said much to each other, but I knew that's where his head was at. And when we got home, he wanted to talk about how he was going to commit suicide. Because at the time, we did not understand, we didn't know that there was a place that we could go for an assisted suicide.
I know that you mentioned before that when someone gets a dementia diagnosis, that there's no hope. It's not like when a person has cancer, there's hope. But there's no hope for survival when someone has dementia. How did that shape the way you and John chose to live the remaining time you had?
There is no hope. And there's hope that it'll take a little longer, but there's no hope for survival. You know you're going to die with this. We started practicing very, very actively that each day is a gift. And we would say to each other, today is a gift. I love you. Today is a gift. I love you. He'd put his arms around me and say, I love you. And then we would go and we lived a very normal life as long as we could. John continued to play golf with his buddies on Thursdays. He and I played golf on weekends together. We continued to go up to Tahoe. We went skiing with our kids in March. In 2021, we went to Spain for 4 weeks. The thing was, what I did though was I adjusted the way we traveled. I knew that he needed to have time to rest each day. So there was more flexibility in our plans that in prior years we would go, 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 go. You know, we sort of kicked back and relaxed. And there was a lot of nice things that happened as a result of that. 2022, we went to France. And I knew that was our last trip. We planned a trip with our children and our grandchildren, all of us, where we took everybody to Hawaii, and I think it was 2021. We knew it was going to be the last trip as the entire family. So we did things knowing that the end was coming, which is a benefit of knowing. And as I said, we tried to live as normally as we could and then of course, normal changed, you know. And as normal changed, I adjusted to that and we just kept living. John was an excellent gardener, and he spent a lot of time in the yard planting his plants and making sure the garden was beautiful. And I would go out and spend a lot of time sitting with him in the backyard and just talking to him and spending time with him and knowing that our time was limited.
Now, you've since mentored others who are navigating this same journey. Would you mind reading a part from your book that talks about what you wish you'd known going into the entire experience?
Yeah, I started seeing a therapist after John died, and his practice focuses on end of life. And he has referred some people to me who are also considering going to Switzerland for an assisted suicide like John did. And they have come either to my house or I've spent time with them on the phone, trying to help them understand how this all works. And I had no one when I did this or when we did this. And so I'm trying to help people sort of be prepared. It's sort of scary to go to some place where you have no idea what's going to happen. So I'm going to read to you from towards the very end of the book. We spent 3 days in Switzerland before he died. And this is day 3, July 26th. We both showered. I laid out John's new unworn soft sweatpants that I bought at Nordstrom for this day. I took a moment to remember my shopping trip. I'd parked my car in the mall lot and walked solemnly to the store. I entered and thought, this is a bizarre shopping trip. What will I say if someone asks me what or who the sweatpants are for? I knew, of course, there was probably no reason for anyone to ask that, but I was feeling very exposed. My emotions flooded to my mouth and heart. Tears clouded my sight. I asked a saleslady, where can I find men's sweatpants? Over on the right towards the back. Thank you, I said. I found the department and again asked for help. I need to buy new sweatpants for my husband. Can you tell me which brand is popular? With each step I took towards the men's section, I thought, I am shopping for clothes for John to die in. Not a birthday present, not a Christmas present, but the last thing he will wear. This is so hard. This is weird. The lady showed me piles, and I felt each brand seeking the softest, most comfortable ones. I thought, I want John to feel good in these. Then I thought, Erica, you know you're not being rational. But I didn't care. I wanted John to feel loved at the last moment, and that I cared enough to buy him new sweats that were soft. Returning back to the present, I handed him his favorite Warriors Champion t-shirt. Then I collected all the rest of John's clothes and stuffed them into his backpack. John watched me. He asked no questions. I left his backpack in a corner of the room for someone else. We met Danny in the dining room. I shall always remember the darkness of that morning and the heaviness in my heart. I shall always remember that I did what needed to be done while the saddest day of my life was beginning. It is not normal to choose the date for your husband to die. It is not normal to orchestrate your husband's death. I wish he had died of a stroke or heart attack or cancer. I wish he'd gotten hit by a bus. I will be living with all of the complicated questions I have for the rest of my life. As we sat at the breakfast table wondering what to eat, the doctor walked in and sat at our table. "Good morning," he said. "How did you sleep?" "Well, John, I told you I'd give you time to think about your decision. Have you changed your mind?" Without hesitation, John answered, "No, I have not changed my mind. I told you yesterday this is what I need to do. This is what I want to do. This is my decision." "Well then, I approve your decision and you can continue the process. A car will be here in an hour to take you to the house. There will be 2 ladies there who will guide you through the process. I wish you well on your journey. Goodbye." The car arrived on time and delivered the 3 of us to a house somewhere in Zurich. 2 smiling middle-aged women greeted us outside. They escorted us into the house. We could see one large room, but other smaller rooms existed behind these walls. The kitchen had a table and chairs, while the adjoining larger area held a sofa, a reclining chair, and a hospital bed off in the corner surrounded by windows. We were asked to sit down and relax at the kitchen table. The ladies introduced themselves to us, but their names flew out of my brain. Who they were did not matter to me. They were part of the process, not my friends. Lady number 1, "You can just sit here and chat for a while. I've called the police and they will be here soon." "Why?" I asked. "Are the police coming?" "Because they need to see John's face and match it to his passport. We need to ensure that John is John." "Oh." John and Danny and I sat around a table, waiting for the police to verify his identity. I have no idea what we talked about, but I know it was not important. The police came relatively fast. "Who am I checking out?" John said, "Me." "Okay, then, I need to see your passport and driver's license." I had John's passport, which I showed to the police, and John still had his driver's license, so he pulled it out. The police looked at the photos and matched them to his face. "Thank you," he said. "Goodbye." Next, one of the ladies explained to us that John had to take an antiemetic drug so that he would not vomit up the medicine that would cause him to die. She said it would take half an hour to take effect. She asked, "When would you like to take the antiemetic?" "I'll take it now," John replied. "Which chair or bed would you like to use?" I popped up immediately. "I want to cuddle with John while he drinks the drink." "Then I recommend you choose the hospital bed." We hung around the kitchen table until the lady said, "The half hour is over. The antiemetic will work now. You can get into the bed any time you want now." John stood up and I followed him. Dan disappeared into another room. John and I climbed into the hospital bed and he put one arm around me. The lady sat by his side in a chair with a lap full of Swiss chocolates. She explained, "The drug is very bitter. I can give you some chocolate to cover up the taste." John had a small paper cup in his left hand, and she filled it with the drug. He asked me, "Shall I do it now?" I shrugged my shoulders. John took a sip, and with a smile, he explained, "Oh my God, this is awful. Is this the last thing I'm going to taste before I die?" The lady next to him said, "No, I told you I have chocolates for you right here in my lap." John reached his hand out for the unwrapped candy and stuffed about 4 pieces in his mouth at once. Then he finished his drink. He lay down and spooned with me. He was behind me with his arm curled under my body. I could not see him, but after about 3 minutes, I felt his arm drop and my body fall onto the bed. I turned to look at him, and he was asleep. I'm sorry. I sat up and put my hand on his heart until I could no longer feel it beat. I watched his skin turn bluish white and then bluish purple. I asked the lady, "Is he gone? Is John dead?" "Yes," she said. "Can you check his heart with a stethoscope?" "No, we don't have any here." "I don't want to leave until I know for sure he is dead." "I can check his pupils for you with the pen light." "Yes, please do." I watched his lovely blue eyes stay still. I knew his life had left him, left me. I sat by his bedside holding his hand. Danny opened the door and came to the bedside. "He doesn't even look like John. That is not John." I did not see what my son saw. I saw my dear husband laying lifeless on the bed. I knew I needed to leave him there, but I wanted to stay with him. It seemed cruel to leave John alone in a strange room with strangers. I also knew I was not being rational. I leaned over his bedside to give John one last kiss goodbye. Then Dan and I left for the airport. I knew I was leaving my life behind me. I chose that chapter to read because those are so many of the things: the police coming, the choosing of the bed, the bitterness of the drink, all of that. I did not know ahead of time. John did not know ahead of time. And I thought that might be helpful for people to know about.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that we talked about that before during the last interview, and it just, I apologize. I know that. I mean, what can you say? You know, it is, I appreciate you being so transparent and so open. Not many people could be that open.
Thank you.
And it's so helpful for people who are going through this.
July 26th will be 2 years. And what I can say now is I am very well aware that John's choice was a gift to himself and to me and to everyone who knew and loved him. Alzheimer's is a brutal disease, and John saved me from having to watch him deteriorate more and more and more. And he gave himself a gift because, as he said to me, "If I don't have a brain, I'm not a person. If I can't give, I don't want to be here." And I am grateful for the beautiful life that we lived together.
It was it was a difficult decision, and he did what was right for him. And that is a gift. It's a gift to be able to do that also, to have that choice, that autonomy to do that.
The autonomy, yes. And for many people, this is not the way they would choose. But for us, this was the right thing to do.
I know that you said you left your life. As you walked away, you knew that your life, you left that life. How has the experience changed how you live today?
Well, John made me promise over and over and over again that I would continue to live on. And I will have to say that my first year, I spent much of the year grieving, but I wrote a book in that first year. And that writing was very, very healing for me. And I discovered a new creative process that I love. I did not know I liked writing. I did not know I could write. And that was a gift that I received. And so I have been continuing to write. I started writing a whole bunch of essays, which I hope one day will be a collection in another book. I have continued to travel. Last year, I went to Morocco. For the very first time, I traveled on my own on a photography expedition because I'm a little bit of an amateur photographer. And that turned out to be a very rewarding trip for me. I'm trying really hard to continue to live a productive, healthy life. I'm very aware that I am living alone with my cat. And it's very, very different. And I think about John all the time. I've actually gotten into gardening, which I never did before, but I have to keep John's garden vibrant and alive. And it is our place. I go sit in the garden quite a bit because that's where John is in my mind. And we visit out in the garden. I don't want to sound strange, but so I'm really focusing on doing things that are good for me and good for other people. Still have a very strong relationship with all of my grandchildren and my children and stepchildren, and trying to honor John's wishes.
And part of that is that book, which is I can't wait to read it. Erica, thank you so much for being on the show and for sharing your story with such honesty and heart. If people want to reach out to you or find out more about your book, how can they?
Well, I have a website, ericabaccus.com, and there's a lot of information on Instagram and on my Facebook page, but everything is collected on ericabaccus.com.
Wonderful. Now, of course, put that in the show notes so people can just link into it. Listeners, this conversation is a reminder that love doesn't end when life does, and that honoring someone's wishes can be one of the hardest, most sacred acts we take on. Whether you're a caregiver, a partner, or simply someone navigating the complexities of loss and choice, I hope today's session offered you something to hold on to. For those who want to learn more about Erica's work, her journey with John, or her new book, A Promise Kept, Honoring His Wishes, Embracing Our Love, be sure to check the show notes for links to her website and where to find the book. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you've found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.